All right, Scott, you ready? Okay. Call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. First order of business, as usual, are the minutes, and we have the minutes from October 18th, 2022 here. Is there a motion?
Move we accept them subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1.
On item number 3, principal should be changed to PAL.
Oh, yes, it is. Page 2. Hearing no other corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of October 18th, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Moving right along to public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to make any public comment tonight before we move on? See no one in the room. How about online?
No one online, Terry.
All right. And we'll go directly to item number 4. That's the liquor license application. And Eric, you want to introduce the folks that are here?
Yep. Acting as a local liquor control board, the select board has an application from Railroad and Main Restaurant. Consider a first, third class license and an outdoor consumption permit. We have folks from Railroad and Main here this evening and answer any questions the board has. This is a new restaurant that will be coming to Finney Crossing. Staff has no objection to this application.
Good, thanks. Why don't you folks come up to the table where the microphone is, and the microphone does not amplify, but it just
No problem.
So I think you already operate a facility in Essex.
Correct, yep.
And could you just tell us a little bit about what you'd like to do, including the outdoor consumption?
So we are casual fine dining, and we'll be changing our menu a bit over in Williston. And we'd like to do beer, wine, liquor, specialty cocktails, and outdoor consumption. The area over there actually butts up to a micro park or pocket park, but it will be obviously fenced in. Outdoor seating, I think capacity could be up to 60. It won't be more than 35 or 40, and that might even be on the high end.
All of your staff is currently trained, I presume, and are you moving out of Essex over to Williston?
We are. We're relocating. It won't be a second location.
Okay.
So our current staff will be coming. I'm assuming we'll hopefully hire additional staff, and they'll get trained as well,
Right.
if they're not already.
Good, thank you. Other questions from the board?
Just real briefly, what is your philosophy, procedure, about ensuring compliance with the law about serving alcohol?
I would say I think we're pretty conservative on the alcohol consumption, but our restaurant and vibe isn't really, we're not gonna have TVs. You're not gonna sit there for hours and drink. We're not, even in Essex, we have a couple TVs in Essex, but the atmosphere is basically come and have dinner, grab a glass of wine, a nice glass of scotch, but we don't particularly have a menu or an atmosphere that kind of leads itself to being a place to hang out. And girlfriends might come and get, have a wine night or something, but it's just not, we're just not like that kind of place. And we never do. We're not, my husband Todd does our beer list. It's all craft beer. You're not gonna find, bucket of Bud Light for $10. You know what I mean? We just don't, it's just not that kind of place, so, yeah.
Okay, and training of staff or instruction you would give staff?
So restaurants can do two things for liquor compliance. There is a DLC certification that is online, and when they get that goes for any restaurant. Like if they left Railroad and Main and went to Felino's, it follows them to Felino's. There's another program that a lot of restaurants use that's called in-house training, that the owners of the restaurant will conduct. But I don't think it's as thorough, and I don't think they pay attention, and, you know, so we actually don't allow that in our restaurant. So everyone who's serving alcohol has to get DLC certified through the state. We don't allow, there's also a few programs that Vermont accepts that are not through the state, and we just keep it all through DLC.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, a motion is proposed.
Move to approve a first and third class liquor license and an outdoor consumption permit for Railroad in Maine through April 30th, 2023.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations and.
Thank you very much. We're really excited to make the move.
Welcome.
Are you gonna
We-
keep
we-
the name?
We are. We have too good of a following to change it, and so it's a little bit quirky that we're not on the intersection of Railroad and Main, but we're gonna keep it anyway.
So, no, aren't they gonna request street name changes?
Yes, that will be our next proposal.
You know, the Los Angeles Lakers basketball team was Minneapolis Lakers, which made a lot more sense. And they kept the name, so you're in good company.
There you go. Oh, yeah.
You guys can have bike racks. That's my friends and I are bikeable, so we were wondering if we could bike there. So.
Yes, if you actually go out there, we believe, so we're not building the building, but there is a huge cement pad that we're pretty sure is gonna be for a big bike rack. And the park in front of it is, they've done like 600 plants. They've done a really nice job out there.
Awesome.
We're excited.
Great.
So,
Well, welcome.
thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Moving on to the grand list of errors and omissions that we do every year. And so tonight, Eric, if you'd like to introduce, and Dick Ransom is here to give an explanation.
Yep, as Terry mentioned, this is a list the select board sees every year. It's, the listers can look, after the grand list is put together in the spring and early summer, if there's errors or omissions that occur, it gives the board an opportunity to correct those before the end of the year on our grand list. You have with you a list of recommended changes from the listers that they've approved for your consideration this evening. So a couple minor items this year. Our Assistant Assessor, Dick Ransom, is here to answer any questions the select board has on these errors and omissions.
It's been a while since I presented. Bill has been doing it the last few years, but glad to see you folks. Yeah, pretty basic, a couple of basic ones with veterans exemptions. There is a veterans exemption that goes through the state of Vermont, the VA Affairs, and then they send a file to us. And the first two individuals were on the original file, and in the meantime, the first one had sold, Mr. Laflamme, and a corrected deed had come in on his original sale, and unfortunately, we processed that without realizing we had changed the name from a new owner back to Mr. Laflamme, and by the time we realized it, we had booked the grand list in July. So this is just correcting the ownership and then taking away the veteran's exemption. Second one we found on another veteran was the resident had been filing a homestead in the past few years, didn't this year. Not untypical to have late filers. When I finally communicated with the gentleman, he indicated that he was now a part-time Vermont resident, which doesn't qualify him for the veteran's exemption. So we have to take that away. The third one was just a minor land transfer down at that infamous Industrial Avenue Route 2 area. And we had processed what we thought was a easement or a right of way, and it was actually a sale of a small piece of land. So we had to make that adjustment, just reducing the acres by a small amount. The last one was an interesting one. It was from a 2012, August 30th of 2012 tax sale. The Lister Assessor's Office was never informed via usually a property tax transfer return. Never got processed as far as we could tell at that time. So the ownership never got changed, and it's been going on since 2013 would have been the first grand list year. So we can correct this year There has been a subsequent property tax transfer return that will actually solidify the transaction, so next year will be all set. So those are the four. The net effect is about $49 increase to the town municipal rate. So not a big, it might be to the taxpayers, but.
It's in the direction we like it to go, though.
Fill up a truck with gas.
Pardon?
Fill up a truck with gas.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, our budget woes next year are all set.
Any questions for Dick?
Dick, one question if you don't mind.
Sure.
Under the last one, unlanded mobile home.
Yeah, that means that it's not, they are renting a space or the space is owned by someone else. That
Okay.
They're either charging rent or not charging rent. This was a family situation, so.
Okay, so the 46.5 is that
It's just the value of the mobile home.
value of the mobile home? Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions? A motion is suggested.
I'll move to approve the corrections to the 2022 grand list as proposed by the listers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. So now we're up to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick.
Thanks, Dick.
Yes, thank you, Dick. We're up to the interviews of the remaining 5 candidates for the Community Center Stoughton and Library Assessment Steering Committee. 2 weeks ago, we interviewed 5 candidates, and we do have 5 candidates tonight as well. And I believe we have 4 in the room right now, and 1 will be on Zoom, if not right now, very soon.
Yeah, I don't see Erin yet, but I think she's planning to join at 7:15 from the school board meeting, so.
We need to wait until she appears, and so maybe we can move on to the town values policy.
Sure. So this
And
is
Eric, that's you.
Yep, this is a policy that the board's reviewed over the last 3 meetings, I believe. First couple looking at the DEI components of the town value statements. I presented the board with an initial draft, including those and some other town values that we've looked at previously. On October 18th, received feedback from the board that evening, and I've made some additions to the policy after the feedback from the board. Specifically, section 2.6.1, I rewrote after feedback from the board and added some language in a new section 3 evaluation. Bring this back to the board this evening. If the board has any additional amendments to include here, or can also consider adoption as presented, or with any amendments that the board would like to bring to the policy.
So it appears that things were added that we requested at the last meeting. Any questions for Eric on this?
No? Looks good.
Looking for a motion on this as well.
I'll move to adopt the town values policy as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Thank you.
If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And we can also go on to item number 10, the personnel policy amendment. And Eric, we talked about this last meeting as well.
Yep, another continuation from last meeting. This is an amendment to the town's personnel policy that would allow remote work to occur. There was consensus from the board on October 18th to consider action this evening. I've prepared for the board the language as recommended by the town attorney for the personnel policy. This would permit remote work from time to time at discretion of the town manager. The town manager will consider the reasons for the remote work request and its requested duration, the staffing and other needs of the town, and the nature of the work being performed. Such arrangements may be adjusted at the manager's discretion at any time and from time to time. This is the language drafted by the town attorney. Should the board wish to amend the personnel policy to include this, Our next step at a staff level would be to work on an operational procedure for how this would look with the expectations for staff and a process for the manager to consider these requests and working closely with department heads on how to consider that. I'll say it's certainly something we've seen post-pandemic that's here to stay, and I think there's a way to allow some of this for town employees, but something I told staff is we need to be available to the public in person for all our operating hours and make sure that that can occur. So we'd weigh all those items and proceed here. But I certainly know in today's labor market too, it's for positions that can have remote work. It's something the applicant pool is looking for where it's possible.
Any questions for Eric? If not, then we are looking for a motion on that as well.
I move to approve an amendment to the town's personnel policy addressing remote work as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Since there is none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're waiting for Aaron.
Yep, Erin's on now.
Is she on?
Yep, I'll get her connected right now.
Okay.
Erin, I'm just gonna make you a panelist here. I've got Erin connected.
Hello.
Erin.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
So we do have 5 candidates that we interviewed 2 weeks ago. And we have 5 candidates that we're interviewing tonight. And we anticipate discussing this and making a decision on the appointments after the other business is taken care of tonight. So we'll do the same procedure as we did 2 weeks ago, and that is that we'll start off with questions and go down the line. Each of you will have a chance to be the first on the line and the last in line to answer, and so we'll alternate that as we go along. And so the 4 who are in the room, if you'd come to the table, that would be helpful to us if you don't mind sitting next to each other. And may need to move the microphone as we, or are you going to take care of that? You don't need to. Okay. We're borrowing a second microphone.
Oh, sorry.
So welcome to all of you, and we'll start off with the usual question. Even though we have your applications in front of us, people who may be watching this would be interested in hearing a brief introduction of yourself as to your background and why you'd like to be on this particular scoping committee. So we'll start off with Eldon Carvey.
Thanks, Terry. I'm Eldon Carvey. Let me back up a step from what I've written here and mention that before my family and I were citizens of Williston, we were indirectly citizens of Williston through the Williston school system when our kids were being raised in St. George. That was from 81 right through 92 when we built here. I think I've done a fair job of outlining some of both my volunteer and professional experiences. I'm very proud of the fact that back in the second incarnation, both my wife and I were very active in CRG of Williston. I think that that's relevant to this in the extent that it gave me a pretty thorough baptism to the processes by which town government very largely still works today. My professional work has been both in statewide nonprofit management, and before that, working with Vermonters with Disabilities, helping them find work in the private sector or wherever might be appropriate. And previous to that, I had a small business stint of about 4.5 years as a property inspector, and I also doubled doing some estimating for the construction firm that the property inspection business was independently housed under. I see this, my main attraction to this post is that it seems to me it's one of these really special, I won't say unique, that's a pretty powerful word, but special opportunities to do community building, to do real community building, based on a lot of the different areas of town government coming together on a specific set of concerns. And it's not often we have a chance to do that in, I think, in a discrete process kind of way, such as this committee seems to me designed to be going forward and as their mission. That's really the main focus I bring to this. I am concerned with both adequate library and expanding our recreation facilities in the most inclusive way possible. By that I mean by age, by gender, by every imaginable inclusionary optic and reality. I think that's really what I wanted to leave you with, and I thank you for the opportunity to be considered.
Good, thank you. We have two Aarons here tonight, so I'll go to Aaron Brady first.
Thank you. Thanks for putting up with me on Zoom here. My husband's in Brattleboro doing League of Cities and Towns work, and I'm trying to also be in the school board meeting. So this is suboptimal, but I'll try to make it work. I'm just really committed to our community. Obviously, I'm active on the school board, serving in the legislature right now on behalf of Williston, and I'm really invested in this community here that where Ted and I have made a home and are raising kids, and certainly feel there is a real need for more opportunities to bring families together, and more community, a need for community resources, not just private clubs and other ways, but other ways that people can recreate, kids can get together, after school clubs, teen centers, that kind of thing that Williston just doesn't have despite our growth. And I'm excited about our growth. I think it's an opportunity we should welcome, and also should maximize and continue to make it a community with a lot of resources that meet a variety of needs. So I've been excited about this possibility for a long time. I've been writing to Matt at the Planning Commission, I think since about a year or two after I moved here, like, why don't we have, what could we do? How can I help? So I'm thrilled to be at this point, and really want to just make sure we kind of seize on some momentum where I think there's some community, some pretty far reaching community interest in investing in our own community with some physical resources and growth. So I want to help capitalize on this moment that we're in. Thanks.
And Hazelrig.
Hi, everybody. The reason that this jumped out at me is when it said library. I was a library trustee for many, many years, and so that's the one it's near and dear to my heart. So anything that has to do with the library, I'd love to, expand it, see, make sure it has a place in the community. And I do feel like, I'd love to provide input on, I do think we're lacking in some things in Williston. I've lived here 40 years, and I'd love to see more community centers. I was so sad when the Sports and Fitness Edge got sold and Williston didn't have the opportunity to buy it. I think we need things like that in this town, and I think it's become more and more important, because 40 years ago you could look around and you kind of knew everybody in Williston, and now I have no clue. So I think it's more important than ever, and I think, like Dana was saying, it's really important you know, to have things for all ages, all, you know, all walks of life. So, yeah, I have no expertise in any of this. I'm a plant pathologist at University of Vermont, so.
Good, thank you. Yeah. Erin Henderson.
Hi. Hi, Erin Brady. So I am a Vermonter. I grew up in Addison County with not a lot of options, of things to do outside of the school, and I think that the more rural counties really depend on the schools, as have we. And my family and I moved back to Vermont 10 years ago. And so we lived in some suburban areas where I think there were some interesting ideas that came out of what they did with libraries, what they did with community centers. So I have ideas, but nothing that I'm necessarily wed to. 2 of my 3 children are now in college, and I have 1 child at CVU still, and so I feel like I have some extra time. I have been on, you know, I've volunteered in 4 Winds, I volunteered at Williston Central as the parent rep for the safety committee, but now I really feel like, okay, I could free up a little bit more time and do some things for the community. I think I was a high school teacher for about 20 years, and when I moved back to Vermont, I began working for the state, and I do a lot of facilitation for the state, and so I feel like that's a strength I could bring to the committee, not really having, I have ideas, but nothing I'm 100% wed to, so I feel like that is a role that potentially I could play on the committee to help facilitate all sides. I do appreciate the range. I don't have small kids anymore. I have, I guess, a teenager, but also, thinking about the range of older adults who might be able to use the facility as well. And I also see it as an equity issue when we talk about, private clubs used to, the Edge or whatever, used to play that role, but not everybody can afford that. And so I would really just want to approach it also with that in mind.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
And Andy Michael.
Thank you, Terry. Andy Michael, native Vermonter, other than maybe a decade in college and law school. Shortly thereafter, I've been a Williston resident since first grade through the Williston school system, CVU, all that happy stuff. So Williston's obviously grown during my tenure from a single blinking yellow light at Taft's Corners to a few extra traffic lights. All good, all different. Awesome. Public service stuff. Did a stint on the select board. As part of that, was part of the group that did the fire safety facilities. So have some background in that. Did a stint on the school board. Active member of the Williston Rotary Club, which I think brings a lot to this community, both in terms of ideas and activities. My kids grew up through here, active youth, coach, umpire, all that good stuff. By day, real estate attorney, retiring at the end of the year, so I too have a few more hours in the day and would welcome the opportunity to further serve the town if I can add some expertise and thoughts. But you got some good qualified candidates, so whatever the decision, it's going to be great.
Thank you. Go on to the next question, Greta.
Sure. So same question I asked the other 5, so for fairness, but obviously I see a big important factor in the scoping committee and study is getting the community engaged in this process. So how would you envision getting the community to take an active role in getting their wants and needs and all of that communicated?
This question goes to Aaron Brady.
Thanks. Yep, great question. Very important point and really challenging thing to do. You know, we're working on a new mission and vision statement for the school district, and it can be challenging to get input. So I think my first priority would be just making it as accessible as possible. You know, whether that's online forms, QR codes in places. I think any way that we can gather as much feedback as possible without requiring people to come to big meetings. A few people, you know, can do that. But that's a challenging way to get a lot of input. On the plus side, I think there's actually so much interest in this, and something that talks about physical facilities is a little bit more, you know, since it's more tangible than a mission statement, I think it inherently brings a little bit more engagement in the process. I don't have a, you know, set plan of exactly how we would do that, but I do think it's a very important part of the process, and we've got to make sure that we make it really easy for folks to access, and deliberately make an effort to reach different parts of the community to make sure we aren't just using the same channels or sort of the same strategies before, but ways that we might tap into populations whose voices may not be heard as much in our community. It would take a little more thinking and planning to know exactly how to do that, but I think I think there's a lot of great perspectives here that we could be deliberate about making sure that we are gathering not just, you know, school families or not just senior citizens, not just certain populations, but those whose voices are maybe not heard in our community as well.
Good, thank you. Ann?
I guess, you know, when I was in the library, we were talking about expanding. That was so controversial, just making a new wing. But we have a lot of focus groups, and that was really helpful. And the one good thing about COVID is now we're all pretty comfortable doing Zoom. So I think trying to have like town hall meetings, you know, like they do, like politicians do, or having focus groups. But I think Erin is right. It's hard. You have to sort of select, you know, make sure you get the right demographics, all the demographics represented. So with Zoom, we might be able to get a good, you know, wide range of people. But I think it would take a lot of input with some sort of a focus group or town halls or something like that. So I think we need to hear from everybody, basically. From kids to, you know, us senior citizens.
Good, thank you. Erin Henderson.
You guys are saying all the good answers here. Again, I don't have a set plan. I would think that the committee would work together to try to kind of flesh that out and really think about how are we going to make it most accessible. I know that the technology does help a lot of people. I think that there are some age groups that might not feel as comfortable with the technology, so we might not be, you know, we'd have to really just think about how to do that. And then those who don't have access to the technology as well. So I just think that there would have to be a lot of different ways that we would be able to survey and then get feedback, whether that means going out to different shopping areas, going out to different communities and holding kind of smaller groups, because I think it's intimidating as well I'm a little intimidated, so yeah. I think it would be intimidating for some people to, you know, have to come to this format, but yeah.
Andy?
Thanks. I forgot to mention, I think the first round of why, and you know, almost every day I drive by the park and ride and the new facility going in, and you know, it's taking us so long. It's like, it's time to do this. We've been talking about it. We've been talking about park and ride, so it's so good to see things happening, which is what gets me excited about doing it. Yeah, for me, I'd like to find a list of other communities that have centers. I like to visit them, ask what they do, how they do it, why they do it, what's successful, what doesn't, bring some of those ideas back. You know, go to Whitney Hill, go to Williston Woods, go to the schools, go to youth groups. Yeah, we may need to take the meeting to them, but the more people, or the earlier the better. I mean, a lot of times, you know, we think we've sent the message out, and then we enact something like building height, and suddenly everybody comes out and says, well, I didn't know you were talking about building height, as just as an example. So, yeah, hopefully we're not in a position where we lay out the design for our new community center, and someone says, well, you didn't include it. It's a challenge, we got to figure it out, and we got to do it.
Eldon?
I agree with every modality that has been suggested here as a viable one in its right place. I also go back to, I've done a lot of political campaigning, both here locally in Williston, during the years when CRG was morphing from a protest/pressure group into a political party, and on more statewide races as well. And one of the things that I've learned is that there's nothing that beats, and here I'm not terribly concerned with getting the right demographic mix necessarily, as politically incorrect as that sounds. Nothing beats going out to people's homes and doing some door-to-door input, as well as everything else that's been mentioned here. I think it's that important. And I think unless you get some, I don't know a better word for it, some raw feedback, as well as the more filtered, you're going to be in danger of not getting the whole picture. Let's leave it at that.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Gordon?
Couple comments first, because, you know, I'm a native Vermonter, lifelong resident of the town, and I'm just trying to figure out how we bridge the gap from where we came from to where we are now, because a lot of the ideas are not new ones. We had a park and ride when I was a kid. You know, that's not new. I was a page in the legislature in 1987, and I used to get picked up from representatives from Burlington to hike it down to Montpelier. So I think that's all good. So my question really is two parts. One is around space, because I've heard a couple candidates tonight think about like additions to current facilities that we might have. The library is one. But also, like, would it be thoughts on, you know, a brand new community center? Would it be bits and pieces and parts? And more importantly, what would the programming look like to kind of encapsulate all areas of age? Because I think, you know, definitely seniors have a part in this, so do the youth, but everybody else in between. And I'm just curious, that's a very loaded question, I know, but what your thoughts would be on like how you might put some thoughts out on either additions or new construction, and what type of programming and how that mesh would work.
This starts with Ann.
Oh, great.
I know, hard.
Yeah. Well, I would think it would have to be, you know, a little bit of everything. You know, I think there is probably some way to expand the library, but I think for a community center, I can't imagine that. You know, we can't add on to something we already have because we don't have it. But I remember, didn't the town own land behind Town Hall? Wasn't there a piece of property that was owned by the town that, I thought the library was looking into that at one point?
We actually, I think, rent the land where the library is on right now, but we do own some land out behind Town Hall.
You don't own?
We do.
Oh, you do, right,
We do.
right. Yeah, I thought that, I mean, I think that came up when we were talking about additions or building a new facility. But yeah, I think it's got to be a combination. It would be expensive. I have been to some amazing community centers, one in New Hampshire. It's like, I wanted to talk to them and just to see how they pulled it off, because it had a swimming pool, it had meeting rooms. We were having a conference there. There were kids in and out, and yeah, it was amazing. I'd love to see something like that in Williston. And I don't know if I always thought it, you know, maybe it would be Heinsberg in Williston, you know, or Heinsberg, Shelburne in Williston, you know, 3 towns or St. George. If we couldn't do it ourselves, you know, a community center with 3 towns. But I'd love to see a big new community center. I'd rather have it be where that parking right is, because that's a big piece of property that's gonna be a lot of parking.
Aaron Henderson.
So you want both ideas about where, if I'm just clarifying where, yeah, as well as what. So I have also thought, like, the village is very accessible, but we also need to figure out how to, the space that is involved. So I have also thought that there was property way behind here as well. I think that we do need to also think about, or at least explore, we have a lot of buildings now that are, you know, you go down Industrial Ave, you go down over like over by the edge, and I know there's a no compete clause there, but there are a lot of abandoned buildings as well. So I just think it just needs to be explored. I'm not saying that that's the answer. But there is also some places where, obviously parking, and getting a place where people can all come together and have access to it, whether people are going to be able to walk to it, or that it'll have, you know, people have to be driving to it. So that's why I just think that, you know, in some ways, however, the village is so accessible. And again, there's not always a lot of space unless we're going back towards the interstate. As far as ideas about what it would look like, I've seen the same, a pool, something, I think that there's often like a lot of focus, you know, for little kids and families, and then often a pool works for older adults, but not always whatever's in the middle. Maybe it's, I know that the library for a long time was kind of, you know, kids would go there after school up until about 6th or 7th grade, and then it did not become cool anymore. Where are kids going who maybe are 8th grade through whatever, who aren't driving, who aren't doing after school sports? So just thinking about what kind of rec center, what could be available for kids potentially after school who aren't involved in the traditional, what, you know, the schools have to offer as well, so.
Good, thank you. Andy?
I think it's a chicken, egg, chicken problem. Which comes first? My best guess is we design what we'd like to see, and it's going to cost a ton of money because everybody wants a little this, a little that. That's great. How are we going to pay for it? Where's the money coming from? What can we afford? What can we build? What can we phase? Can we approach businesses? Can we approach private giving? But until we know how much money we have and what we're going to build, then we have to figure out where we can put it. So, you know, if we had an unlimited budget and a 10-acre parcel and we could build what we want, that's one thing. But if we can't afford to build that, then we got to do some creative stuff. So I don't have any preconceived ideas of how much money we're going to have or where we can put it or ultimately what it will look like. But it all comes together. That's the process, and hopefully we build the best thing we can for the best buck for our residents.
Eldon?
Yeah, I guess the only way that I would distinguish myself in my answer here to this question from what other folks have said is that I tend to approach questions like this in an step one, in an extremely open-ended manner. Try to strip myself bare of any and all assumptions and start from there. And what I've been thinking about as other folks have been talking is it going to be useful, or is it going to get in the way, for instance, for this group to do some tentative sort of model making? Here's one model with like C, here's B, here's C, here's C type 0.2, here's D. Or is that going to tend to close things off in terms of over categorizing too early what we're going to do or not do? I think that can be useful, but coming from where I'm coming from with my long history working with folks with disabilities, one of the things I've learned is that the more you don't assume, the more ways you give for inclusivity, as a general rule. And I don't even know how that works out so well, but it does. And so, while I think the model making can be useful, it can also be a little dangerous at times if it's done too quickly, or people get too categorical about the models they've set up as being worth anything, except as discussion points, perhaps. But I think this whole process, we have a chunk of money to work with. The whole process needs to be approached in a very, very open-ended way to have the best chance to be as inclusive of all interests and needs as possible.
Aaron Brady.
Thanks. Despite my love of Williston and it being my home, I'm not a lifelong Vermonter. And I bring some of my Midwestern perspective to this, I think. I grew up in the Minneapolis area, and I go back every summer for some time, and pretty much every suburb there, granted they are larger than us, but the suburbs even of 40, 50,000 has a really robust community center. In fact, my kids and I make it a mission to sort of pool hop every summer and see how many we can check out. And the things that I think I have seen that are really exciting are obviously aquatics, and that has a multi-generational impact. Those tend to get used heavily for senior programs, certainly a lot for little kids, and then there's options in between for folks who are lap swimming, you name it. So the facilities I've seen tend to have aquatic centers, tend to have some kind of area for small children, whether it's a daycare center or a place for family classes, some meeting spaces that could serve as sort of a senior center and other functions like that. And then I've seen a lot of different variations on the theme. Some have ice rinks, some have climbing walls, some have you name it. And so, admittedly, I'm coming to this dreaming big. I think, whether it's brand new or like Aaron's saying, we, repurpose a building, that we end this process with something that really stands out as unique and accessible and multi-use for all of Williston. And I think in the end, like Andy's saying, partnerships will be really important. It's probably going to require some fundraising efforts. Are there opportunities to work with Part 2 or organizations that do some of the programming for kids? I think Aaron's pointing to a really big gap in we've got pretty limited after school offerings, especially for certain ages. There's a real need there. I don't know the entire kind of after school landscape and what other partners might be available, whether the YMCA would be one or others that we could work with, but I definitely think some partners. And I don't know if it's feasible, but if there's some potential to look at even some, bigger than just Williston. Is this some multi-town effort? Is it, I know we don't have, in the Midwest, county government is very strong, and that also plays a part in some of the recreation facilities that tend to be really robust. We don't have that kind of strong county government. But, you take the surrounding area, you take the area that goes to CVSD, and you've got a population chunk that I think can support a pretty state-of-the-art modern facility. So I think we should explore those options. I know the Upper Valley Aquatic Center, I think is a model, and I know they did a lot of private fundraising and run as a nonprofit. But I think there are also models, we don't have to go all the way to Minnesota, though I would love to find some strong models of what's possible for us here in this area.
Good, thank you. Ted?
I always, last time I did this, I prefaced it the same way I'm going to preface it tonight. This is an important project, and we really have to have a community center. There's no question about that. I'm in favor of it. But I say that to kind of inoculate myself from the next part, which is this is the you have to eat your vegetables kind of question. One of the things that I've seen over the many years, both on the school board and here on the select board, is that we have to be able to sustain the programs that we create. Early on in my tenure on the select board, we had to get rid of a lot of enrichment and some language classes because the school budget was voted down. There are going to be carrying costs associated with this. We're going to have to hire people, probably. We're going to have maintenance costs, we're going to have insurance, we're going to have security issues, all this other stuff. So my question is, and it's probably a little unfair, so I'm not going to weigh the answers too heavily, but how do you feel, and what is your thought on as you go forward with this project, keeping in mind that we do have to keep the budget sustainable, that there it's not just a question of property tax rates, it's also a question of being able to afford things like the day camps where we have low-income kids who don't have to pay, and keeping room in our budget, in our property tax rate for the school property tax rate. So what is your view of cost containment in terms of running this project after it's already built?
So this goes to Aaron Henderson.
Yeah, I knew I was going to get tough. Containment of the project. I feel like there needs to be, I guess, some balance. Like if we look at the growth that's happening in Williston and the housing, I feel like those two things, I mean, we look at businesses that are coming in or restaurants that are opening up. I feel like we need to take that and I don't know the numbers, so Ted, I cannot, give you that. But I do think that there is, that is something that we're already an attractive community. I think there is a lot of support, specifically for the school board and the district right now, because we see what we get, right? What we get out of it. That was the reason I chose to move to this community 10 years ago. It was worth it, the taxes, because this was the school I was going to get. So I feel like the same thing is, people who are looking, and if we are expanding this community, then I think that we can, whether it's coming out of taxes, whether it's coming out of private businesses who are moving into this community, I think that we need to balance that with what we're offering to the community outside of let's just grow businesses. So,
Andy?
Yeah, Ted, great question. I won't pretend I have the answer other than you've asked the right questions, and I think that's what this group would be tasked with, is coming back to the community with a facility that meets our needs and that we can afford. So, yeah, anything from grants to business partnerships to user fees to tax, it all has to go on the table, and we figure it out. And if it isn't sustainable, then if the committee and the town are responsible, I think you cut it back to what we can afford, and maybe there's a phase two. Maybe there's a 10-year plan. It becomes part of the town plan of 3-year, 5-year, 10 years. But we'd have to find a site. If we build phase one, we can tack on phase two. Too early to prejudge. Got to throw everything in the mix and figure it out.
Eldon?
I kind of see your question in two parts. One is, how do you generate sustainability for a project that's coming kind of whole cloth, you know? And I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think there's a lot of unmet need out there in terms of both recreation and improved library facilities, and the possibility of something like a community center, whatever form it might take, that it's going to be pretty easy to sustain the energy for it. And I think the early, whether it's in, forums or the door-to-door stuff I was talking about, or however the initial input gets done, I think we're going to see emerging some really solid, dominant themes about what people want, what people feel they need in this thing. And those are the hooks you can use to keep people engaged and involved. As far as the cost, my bias and that sort of thing has always been aim for what you can't have so you can figure out what you can. Use the ideal as a way of letting yourself whittle down to what you can afford. Things can't go wrong that way, because everything you can't fit in to your initial proposal is out there for possible future follow-up.
And Aaron Brady?
Thanks. I don't know that I have a lot to add here, other than obviously it's a really important question. I think Andy nailed it, and I think Aaron as well, and that I do get this sense that there is it's certainly not universal, voters are unique, but that there is a growing kind of sentiment in Williston of sort of where's the balance, where, we are accepting a lot of growth and development, and we want some things for that, some quality of life things for that. So I think having a successful center sells itself in some ways, like good schools do, and that's important. And communication is tremendously important. The select board, kudos to Eric, you've done a great job in communicating the budget in the last few years. I think that kind of work, people need to understand, what their investment gets them. And I think we have to talk, whoever the community leaders are, about, not just taxes as sort of a burden, but also what are our aspirations as a community, and how do we pool our resources for that, and what do we get as a community in that way. So hard to say in advance, but certainly understandable that is has to be part of the conversation.
Thank you. And Ann?
Well, I would think it would have to be a combination of things like a bond just to get the building started, but then I think there has to be to sustain it, I think it's got to be a tax. It's got to be rolled into everybody's taxes somehow. But I think as we would work with different groups, I think that's a question that needs to be asked, is what, we'd like to do this. What would you be willing to have your taxes increased to? And I don't know enough about town finances to know, $25 a person, $100 a household. What would that, what would we need to sustain just having, 3 employees, it's got to be a $300,000 budget with keeping the lights on, and, so you got to do the math, I guess, and then ask the people if they're willing to, meet that, because if they're not, I don't think it is sustainable.
Good, thank you. So we're down, I think, to the last question. Jeff?
Sure. You don't want to ask a question? So I guess I don't really have a question that I can really add to what's already been asked. So instead, I'm going to make a comment and then look for your thoughts on that comment. And my comment is thank you for volunteering. I don't really envy you. because you've got a huge task in front of you. And as I've listened just to the discussion tonight, and we've had the same discussion in a previous meeting with 5 other candidates, and it was the same thing happened, where the diversity of the information you've provided us about what could happen. I'm just going to read back a couple of my notes. You know, it's children to seniors, pool to library to climbing wall, one building versus possibly multiple buildings, dream big versus the economic reality, disabled versus non-disabled, new versus repurposed buildings, capital costs versus operating cost, and providing multiple mechanisms for the community to provide input. So my comment is given the immensity of what you need to be doing, how are you going to be able to focus, to take all that, put the important pieces together, to focus on what is the answer that will ultimately have to come to either the select board or the community to be approved? And it can't be a multifaceted answer. It has to kind of be a pretty concise answer, including how much is it going to cost from a capital standpoint, how much is it going to cost to run it year to year to year. So good luck with trying to answer that question, if you will.
So Andy will give you the first opportunity on that one.
Sure. So I suspect we're all here because we love Williston and we love a challenge, and none of us can promise that we'll be successful other than if I'm appointed, I pledge my hardest efforts. I would really like to go out and tour other facilities. I may not make it to the Midwest or wherever, but I think there are some good things here. Yeah, ask some questions. What do they have? How do they afford it? What do they see their 5-year plan? So it's a ton of hard work, information gathering, get the stakeholders involved, all of the people you just met, and yeah, we make the sausage, and hopefully the end result comes out that's something that we can create and that we're proud of, and we can execute on it.
I can't wait to
promise to try hard.
Eldon, you're next.
I think one of the things that, I agree with you, Jeff, this is not an assignment for the attendant. I think one thing that's going to be really important for the, whatever the group ends up looking like in terms of the personnel, is some initial and ongoing team building with that group, within that group, because it is going to be a tough task. And there's going to be, I have a feeling, a multiplicity of different visions out there. They're going to be like shooting stars all over the place at first. And if there's not that, well, that's a problem in itself, because that's a lack of imagination. And if there is that, it's a different kind of problem, but a much easier one to deal with. And that's a multiplicity of riches around ideas, that some of which may be wildly improbable and others may be somewhere near the ballpark. And others may be right at home plate. So the team building part, I think, both initially and ongoing for this group of people, whomever they turn out to be, is going to be critical and not to be underestimated.
And Aaron Brady.
I think we'd have to develop a pretty clear action plan and work backwards from it. What are the targets? What are the dates by which we need certain information, and develop a really sort of step-by-step action plan of how we're going to get to those pieces. I will say, admittedly, I don't have a ton of free time. I'm pretty extended. I'm really interested and passionate about this. And also, I know my voice is plenty loud in Williston, and I'm also happy to step aside. I just want to make sure that that the momentum is maintained, that a range of voices are represented, that there is a real focus on kids and families, and that is part of it. You know, that I bring that personal passion, and I'm a parent of younger kids, though they're growing up fast. So, you know, to me, those are really important things to have represented. But in the end, I'm happy to help and support this. However, even if I'm not in this group, whatever that looks like, it sounds like Erin would have us organized very quickly and well, given her experience.
And
Well, I was thinking the same thing that Erin, you know, I still have a day job, and this is a huge, huge project. And I wonder if five people on committee, that just doesn't seem like enough. So I'm willing to step aside also and help, but some of the people that are retired and might have more, this is a huge task. And
Absolutely agree.
yeah, and so it seems very daunting with 5 people. And so how do you envision this working? Like, do we have an official charge for this committee?
we do. We do. That was the first thing that we came up with when we proposed to have 4 members of the citizenry on this, as well as 1 select board member, 1 school board member. So, and then we have the consultants that we've hired. So.
Oh, there are hired.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
very helpful.
we would not be able to do that. We would not be able to do that without.
Okay, that's a
scoping
good,
study.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to step aside, let these guys, there are better people here to do this, but I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Erin Henderson.
I think you're talking all your candidates out of this. No, so I was also thinking, you know, why the number that you decided on? Just as a question, you know, will it take more than that to be on this steering committee? I was also thinking about just making sure, I guess, that whoever is on the committee has different strengths that they bring to the committee, different perspectives, different points of view, and, you know, obviously, but then also whatever their backgrounds are, or whatever their strengths are, that that will just, I think, help the committee, because there's going to be a lot of organization, right, that you're going to have to go through. And so just considering that as you're moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. And that is our goal tonight, is to do exactly that as we get closer to the end of the meeting. Erin?
Sorry, I just want to, I guess, clarify. I mean, I am thrilled to serve on the committee, and also fully understand that, you know, my voice might not be needed, but I do think it's important that we have, you know, a range of different voices, and we don't design a process that only someone who can make it a full-time job or is a retiree can access, because I think that's really going to change and limit where we end up. And while I, you know, appreciate people giving that kind of time, you know, I want folks who are, you know, working families, juggling things in their real lives to be a part of this and a voice in it. So I guess I just, as that conversation turned a little bit, it made me a little nervous in that direction we were headed. So I want to clarify.
Thanks. So as you know, we have 10 candidates and 4 slots to fill. We have many other opportunities within the town if you're interested in something else, if you're not selected. So we'd be very pleased to have you serve in any capacity that you can. And we'll have an interesting discussion. You're certainly welcome to stay. It'll probably be another 20 minutes or so before we get to discuss the appointments. But you're welcome to do that here or online or not at all. So.
You know, I just have one other comment that just for the committee. You know, one thing I was struck with when I go back to the Midwest, there are these mega churches that are there. And I went to one once with my stepmother, and I thought, how are these people pulling this off? This is what we want. It's an amazing community center. I don't want it to revolve around religion, but they had like cafes and people, and a library within these big mega churches, and no swimming pools, but, but I mean, that's another model that, as people go out and look into this, they figured something out in these big, 2,000 person churches. So
Yes.
I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Say hi to Dennis.
So, moving on to the public information hearing on the special town meeting to consider the Communications Union District. And Eric, you have a presentation to make for us tonight.
So I'll run through some slides. It doesn't look like we have a lot of folks online, but hopefully this will be recorded. And if you're watching this and it's been recorded, I'll have my contact information. And please reach out if you have any additional questions before you consider your vote for the special town meeting. So we have a special town meeting coming up a week from today on November the 8th. We've had early voting available for just over the last 5 weeks or so. There's a single article to consider at the special town meeting. And right now is a public information hearing with information about that article and an opportunity for the public to ask any questions that they have regarding this article. We're going to talk about Communications Union District. So the one and only article on the warning, it's on the back of the general election ballot, mailed to all registered voters, is shall the town of Williston enter into a Communications Union District with one or more municipalities under the provisions of 30 VSA Chapter 82 for the purpose of improving access to broadband services. So I'll start out with talking about the problem to solve. There's approximately 4% of households in our region that do not have access to broadband internet services. And what do we mean by this? It's at least 25 megabytes per second of download speed and 3 megabytes per second of upload speed. 75% in our households in our region have cable internet, but could be better served by fiber internet. And a fiber internet connection is defined as speeds of 100 megabytes per second download and the same for upload. We're seeing increasing needs for multiple devices to be used at once in our households and businesses. We talk about remote work, joining school remotely and performing schoolwork remotely, and with broadband, telehealth, and many other uses for broadband in our modern world. We also see about 30% of commercial sites in our region having access to fiber. The state of Vermont has set an objective to bring universal broadband services to every address. So let's take a look at Williston's connectivity. There's about 140 homes in Williston that do not have access to broadband internet today, and this creates real challenges. This map below on this slide shows households that have internet speeds of 4 megabytes per second download and 1 megabyte per second upload. So what does that really mean? With that internet speed, it could allow basic web surfing for one user. Think about checking a web page, checking your email, and that's just one person at a time. If you're trying to do a video call or stream a movie or tune into the select board meeting this evening, it's likely not possible with that type of connection at your home. So it's, as I said, this creates a great challenge in our modern world. So the solution for the voters to consider is forming this Communications Union District. It would be a new special unit of government that enables one or more cities or towns to build or cause to be built communications infrastructure together. Today, it's not appealing to internet companies to invest in infrastructure with areas of low density. This Communications Union District can serve as a single point of contact to negotiate with providers and leverage grants. And currently, most house sites don't have access to a choice of providers, so usually one person that may be the option, or company rather. So coming up right now, on or before November the 8th, the question to form a CUD is being considered here in Williston, in Essex, Essex Junction, Shelburne, and South Burlington. The Communications Union District is created if at least 2 communities support it through this local special town meeting process. Others could join after creation, but it requires at least 2 to support the item on the ballot coming up. So we're talking about a new government here. This new government would be a standalone municipal entity. It would be completely separate from the town of Williston. It would be governed by a board of directors that each member, city, or town appoints to serve as the governance for this new government. And currently in Vermont, there are 9 communications union districts with over 200 member towns and cities to date. I'll talk about the primary role of the communications union district. These roles are to deliver public funds to the providers to build a network and determine the financial model to utilize. These districts provide public oversight to ensure the network is built to reach all underserved areas. And by working together, municipalities are more likely to attract a provider and leverage public grant funding available. So looking at the money, CUD has no taxing authority. The build-out must be funded from grants, loans, gifts, or private investment. Membership in the CUD poses no financial risk to the town or individual taxpayers, and this is according to state statute. Taxpayer dollars will not be used, and if the CUD were to fail, no liability falls to the member town or the taxpayers. If you do not subscribe to the eventual internet service offered by a CUD, there's no cost to you. You have to opt in to receive these services, and the CUD becomes the governance vehicle to help solve this problem. So a few other things to share here. The current cost to build this network is unknown. Work is underway right now with a consultant hired by the state to determine the cost and potential business plan to explore by this potential Chittenden County CUD if it were to form. There's a limited amount of grant dollars available for Chittenden County. The state broadband board has funds allocated on an unserved road mile basis. And even we have an issue here in Chittenden County, our unserved road mile basis is the lowest in the state. The state's using federal ARPA dollars that the state's received, that the legislators appropriated towards this effort. So there are funding available. You have to have the CUD to unlock the funding to come flow through the state. But what's been earmarked for Chittenden County is lower compared to other sections of the state right now. It may be determined through this work there is not a viable pathway forward. But after the negative pieces of possibilities here, I have to focus on the positive that forming the CUD is the best possible option available we have today to work to achieve the universal service model to improve broadband coverage in our region. Should the voters support the formation of a CUD, it would be the first step in the process. Next, if it were approved, a board would be established to govern the CUD. Then plans would be determined as the best financial and business model for the CUD to pursue by its board. And this would likely involve issuing a request for proposals to identify possible partner providers for that service to be delivered from. The CUD board would then determine the best pathway forward at that point. So it's forming this new government to enable the ability to explore whether these partnerships can be facilitated in a business model that works to deliver the broadband services. So finally, why create a CUD? Number of reasons to consider. Funders are familiar with municipal districts, grant makers, Vermont Municipal Broadband Board, for example. There's public accountability created in this new government. There's additional funding opportunities. There's either access to federal and state grants and loans that require providing services to those least served. Risk mitigations created. Individual towns are not on the hook for coming up with capital and solving this problem on their own. Town boundaries are also irrelevant. Roads and topography and settlement patterns are most important when you think about running fiber optic cable and those pathways that would follow. It's also efficiency. Network design, construction, and operation can all be more efficient when planned from the onset. And also the entire region can benefit. It eliminates cherry picking by requiring universal service across a region regardless of density. It also aggregates demand. Mixing dense and less dense towns makes the project more attractive to providers and more negotiating power. I've mentioned working to deliver broadband to all unserved addresses, but as an ancillary effect here, when you think about stringing fiber to these homes that don't have service right now, it creates an opportunity for homes that may have cable service to then subscribe to a new fiber optic service with a new provider, or a new option for obtaining internet service that's now going by their home, and it gives opportunity for more people to engage in that, and that also plays into the business planning and financial model that would be explored here moving forward. So again, here's a map. It's kind of small on this slide, but the communications union districts throughout Vermont, the ones in gray, towns in gray, are currently not part of CUDs. There's certainly been a lot of news as of late with the Vermont Broadband Board making grants to these CUDs to help get the connections going and get the plans off the ground. So I'll share my contact information on the screen for anyone watching at home. I don't believe we had any members of the public joining. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and check here. Oh, we do have some attendees here. But their town staff and Representative Brady is still on as well. Certainly if there's questions online, and we also have some folks in the room joining us for our next agenda item, I'm here to answer any questions this evening.
Any questions from people in the room or online? Probably not. Any questions from the board?
You answered my one question, which what was meant by universal service model, but I think I got it now. It's universal across the area. Everybody has access to at least a minimum quality, is that the right word? Of service.
Right.
Okay. That was it.
Yep.
No question.
Gordon?
I'm good.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing the results a week from tonight on that particular item as well as others. So we'll move on then to the Lake Iroquois Association annual update. So if you'd like both of you to come, we have Shannon Kelly, who's the president of the Lake Iroquois Association, and visiting past president Chris Conant as well.
Emeritus.
So welcome, Eric. Did you want to lead off anything on this one, or just turn it over to them?
I'm just getting their presentation queued up here, but every year we have our folks from Lake Iroquois Association that join the board to share what they've been up to over the last year. I know they've been busy, like every year, and I've got an interesting report to share with you this evening. So I'll turn it over to Lake Iroquois Association, and I'll get your presentation up here in just a second.
Welcome again.
Well, thank you very much to everyone for allowing us some of your time to meet here this evening and let you know what we've been doing, what we've been up to for the past year since I last spoke. I'd also like to thank Shirley for her help as well. We really appreciate it, and also Eric for helping facilitate so many things for us as well before we get started here. Okay, so this is our 2022 update, and we'll start off with aquatic invasives management. This year we have great news to report. We had to perform practically no active management. In previous years, when we had an abundance of milfoil, Eurasian milfoil, we had to put out channel markers out from the boat launch, the Vermont Fish and Wildlife boat launch. But none were needed this year because there was no milfoil present. Again, same with diver-assisted suction harvesting. In past years, it's been a few years since we performed dash. We had to perform no dash this year because again there was no milfoil. Benthic mats, something else that we strategically place, typically near the beaches, near the beaches, to keep the milfoil at bay, but none were put out this year. So that's a good news story for us. Those are, those time, money, resources, commitment on the part of a lot of people. It's also important to note that the benthic mats and the dash also require, even though we hold permits for those things, we still have to approach DEC to provide justification for actually putting out the mats and performing dash, and of course aquatic herbicide as well. So we had to do none of those things. No active milfoil management with the exception of some hand pulling in the South Cove on the Heinsberg side. So that's our good news story to share on that front this year. Next slide, please. So that's what it looked like in the summer of 2018. We showed a similar slide last year, the same slide as far as the summer of 2018 This year, we have a new slide, summer 2022, so we're happy as far as to be able to illustrate, to show everyone that essentially everything has been very effective in terms of our milfoil management efforts. Next slide, please. We performed 2 aquatic plant surveys. We also have some other data collection that we perform. So we performed an aquatic survey on June 6th of this year to, of course, try to detect any milfoil regrowth or reemergence in our littoral zones. We had quite a few points throughout the lake, but no milfoil was detected within the sampling grid, within the survey grid. September, there was none within the sampling grid, but we pointed the gentleman in the direction of the South Cove to verify whether there was any other milfoil there from where it had been previously hand-pulled. There was a small clump there as well. Again, easily hand-pulled, which is where we want things in terms of invasive milfoil. There's another invasive that is not quite as obtrusive as milfoil, and certainly not something that we're going to try to approach with any active management, but curly-leaf pondweed is the only other aquatic invasive in Lake Iroquois. That compares with about 51 in Lake Champlain, just to provide some relativity there. For a number of years, since 2011, we've also sampled multiple tributaries going into Lake Iroquois. What we sample for is phosphorus. We try to gauge what levels of phosphorus are going in. This year, the state asked us to sample for some chloride relative to wintertime salt usage, and that was the other constituent that we added. And we sample about 10 of those around the lake, so northern, western, southern, and eastern side of the lake. Next slide, please. Our greeter program, that has been very successful as well. Our primary mission is to prevent aquatic invasive species from entering or leaving the lake. And the way that we do that is the greeters educate the watercraft users on the aquatic invasive species that are in Lake Iroquois. They communicate that, they distribute educational pamphlets. They also, although it's a law that people can essentially say no, but they have a hot wash station set up as well. They'll ask, where the watercraft has been. Is it coming from Lake Iroquois, Lake Champlain, or some other water body? That's the type of data that they collect. So one of the most interesting statistics that they run from Friday of Memorial Weekend till Monday of Labor Day. 3 days a week between those, bracketed by those 2 periods. So we're missing a lot of watercraft, but during those periods in 2019, they essentially inspected 912 watercraft. We're all the way up to 2,474 for 2022. Now, we don't have survey data. We didn't talk to people and ask them, hey, what brought you to Lake Iroquois? It's purely anecdotal, but we've heard a lot of positive reports on the ability of kayaks, canoes, and that sort of thing to be able to be in the littoral zone, which is where many people want to be whenever they're exploring the shoreline and looking for wildlife.
In the what? I'm sorry. The what zone?
Littoral, near shore. Near shore is what littoral refers to.
Well, now I know that.
Yep.
Are there people who refuse the hot wash station?
There are. It is a law, but our greeters are not law enforcement officials. Yeah. And I think, and this is a challenge throughout the state, folks can essentially say no, and the best that they can do is try to convince them to.
Anecdotal information as to why they refuse. Why do they refuse?
Some people claim that they haven't taken the watercraft into or out of any other lakes. Sometimes they claim, well, we wash it ourselves at home. That's hard to verify. Sometimes the greeters will push back a little bit and say, well, can we go in and inspect your watercraft, just to verify that? And some will relent, but still others just simply say, hey, we don't want to. So it's unfortunate.
It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
A follow-up question, if you don't mind. Would it be possible, and sorry, I didn't want to interrupt with questions, I probably have some more, but would it be possible to make a condition of allowing a boat to go into the lake, either that it be washed first or that it be washed afterwards?
I think the regulation essentially states that, but it would require a regulatory enforcement
Yeah.
arm. I agree with
Yeah.
you.
Concept is a good concept, but
Yeah.
you don't have the ability to carry it out. Yep.
Right.
Makes
Right.
sense.
I think it's a perpetual issue that's going to carry forward, which, we're glad we're there. We know we'd love to see what actual numbers would be in front of us if we had every single day, 7 days a week. Let's just say 101 days of summer, if you will. I'm sure it would probably easily be double that, if not more, if I had to guess.
We saw a huge influx of all size watercrafts, but mainly paddle type. Didn't see a big increase in motorboats as much as paddle and kayaks, and so it's pretty interesting.
And do you attribute that to Lake Iroquois being a more desirable water body now to paddle on versus in the past when you had to deal with whatever you would, like obstructions caused by milfoil? Okay.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and Chris knows this very well, in relation to where his camp is located on the Williston side, I haven't been down at that end. My in-laws have a place on the southern end, so I don't catch the smell quite like others did. But I know that was some of the feedback that the Lake Iroquois Recreation District has received, and I know Chris has heard it over his many decades there.
August of 18, 19, 20, the smell. There was a few times that Jim Johnson told us that people asked for their money back. They were sitting on the beach and decided that the smell was too difficult to handle. There's some great pictures, a line of pictures on our website, on the Lake Iroquois website, that will kind of give you a progression of from 2015, 16, all the way through to this year. And if you look at the pictures, 2 years ago you could see the milfoil in the middle of the lake. You could literally see the coloration. And now, if you look at them, it's amazing. And I literally have had dozens of people come past camp and say thank you for the efforts and the energy that we put into it. It's great to see it. Plus, we're not raking. The amount of milfoil this year was none, and so there's no traveling the milfoil, which is easily propagated, so it's great to see that.
So I guess I might as well ask this question now. Why is there none? And I suspect I know the answer, but I still want to hear what your opinion is of why there is none.
Yeah, I think the aquatic herbicide treatment in late June of last year has continued to be effective. And it's important to point out, I think this is some of the criticism, that the association received from over the years, and others who have attempted this as well. The important thing going forward is for us to stay vigilant. We didn't need to use dash or benthic barriers or channel markers or anything, and that's where we want to keep it. But going forward, we would love to avoid having to use herbicide. It is costly. It's the most resource-intensive thing. But that requires vigilance on our part, which is, essentially why we do what we do. And our plant surveys are a key part of that. So beginning of the season and then towards the end, are we going to get regrowth? And detection is going to be important.
We're seeing we're seeing a large increase in native plants, regrowing and reestablishing, which is great. I think that if you look at we're able to apply in 40% of the littoral zone in that one application. That's part of DEC's requirement, and only 40% per season. And I think that the stars were aligned. When the contractor that we hired to do it was there, and we were there with the state agency overseeing the chemical application, and just everything aligned, and we were, all of us, including the applicator and the state, are surprised at how well we did. It's a target specific, Procelicor is a target specific to milfoil only. and, that will kill milfoil only. And so, we're very fortunate. There's 10 lakes in the state that have used Procelicor. And, when we came in front of you a few years ago, now several years ago, about other chemical uses, we really found that this was the target that we should use, and we used it, and we've had amazing success. Okay. And as difficult as it is for some people, we have literally regaining control of the health of that lake. And we feel that we've done it in a responsible way. And the state is also seeing the same thing throughout the other 9 lakes in Vermont. So
It sounds like your vision for going forward is you're hoping to stay away from another application. You certainly can't promise that. You'll monitor, and if needed, you'll do another application. I assume through the state permitting process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. The permit is good for 5 years. As with all of our permits, we still have to go back and ask permission, and the state in its purview has to see that there is still justification, even though we hold a permit for any of these things.
Okay. Interesting permit. Huh?
It is, right. It just doesn't allow you, it's not like a wastewater permit where you're continually discharging. You do have to still ask permission twice, basically.
Okay.
So, but I think that's a good control, though, when you're dealing with something like that, for sure. Next slide, please. So this just, we talked about watercraft. The numbers in yellow are where I would like you to focus your attention. So it was just interesting to see kayaks. We had 818 kayaks out of that total number. That suggests to me, that tells me that, folks are getting out there in greater numbers, with smaller watercraft, as I mentioned before, and enjoying the water. We had 449 paddle boards. So it was quite a year for folks getting out and recreating. So those were interesting numbers.
And that's only 3 days a week that we're counting.
Right.
So can you imagine what our actual numbers were?
Yeah. Next slide, please. It's not official, but we've also had some other great news. Lakewise Award Program. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar, but basically what it does is it encourages lake shoreline owners to invest in their property, implement shoreline protection efforts. It could be something as simple as just no-mow zones down near the shore. It could be what's considered low impact development, strategic plantings of flowers and other types of landscaping that basically slows the flow of water and improves water quality. So this year, we had 6 leading up to 2022. We had 9 additional shoreline properties awarded by Vermont DEC this year for 15 total lake-wide properties. One of the key tenets of the program is, I guess there's some psychology here, and they talk about this on their website. Once 15% of the total number of lake properties have been awarded, they achieve Lakewise Gold status. It's unofficial at the moment. We have technically reached that metric. Only 2 other lakes in the state have achieved that so far. We look to have more folks participate, but that's something very positive for us to report this year. Which basically means the most important part of that is more lakeshore owners are getting involved with protection efforts on their property, which leads to better water quality within the lake.
That also gives us a bit of a advantage when we're applying for any kind of grants in the positioning of the gold status. So we're very happy about that.
We work, as some of you may know, we work pretty closely with the Lake Iroquois Recreation District. We have 2 folks who also serve time on the Lake Iroquois Association Board. So this year, we worked with them to apply for a $50,000 implementation matching grant through Watersheds United Vermont. BB Lane has some historical problems. It's a low road bed. It's set essentially in a wetland. It has poor stormwater, where there really aren't any stormwater practices. It floods periodically. If anybody has ever been down there in the winter to walk the trail or do some other recreating, it gets in pretty rough shape. So it needs to be rehabilitated. As with many road projects, it's not a glamorous type project. It's not restoring a wetland. We've worked very hard and long for many years to try to draw some attention and get some grant funding for this. So we did achieve $50,000 matching grant. We also have a board member who reached out to Senator Sanders' office for congressionally directed spending fund initiatives. So we're still waiting on, they thought it was a great project. They sent it forward to Congress, but as everybody is in the same boat federally, we're all waiting to see where that lands. So we're very hopeful that the other $320,000 of a $400,000 project, essentially due to inflation, shakes out. Each organization, Lake Iroquois Association and Lake Iroquois Recreation District, have also each committed $10,000 towards this project if we were to get the funding, the remaining funding that would be required. But still good news for us this year. We're inching forward with that. Next slide, please. We've also been working with the Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District and the Lewis Creek Association to basically implement a watershed action plan grant. Essentially, if I could distill this down, we're looking at Lake Iroquois and the Patrick Brook watershed down to the La Platte. We're looking at problem areas. What this will do is essentially our engineering contractor of record will go out and do field surveys and look for problem areas to basically generate what are known as project sheets. We'll take those. When we have this watershed action plan in place, similar to Lakewise, the Lakewise Award, and some other things, that provides a lot of wind in our sails to apply for grants and be successfully awarded grants because we have an action plan that carefully outlines all of these things. And this is funded by the Lake Champlain Basin Program. And we're actually about 18 months into it and should hope to have it finished up by next year, sometime about this time next year. Next slide, please. On the conservation front, we had another successful nesting year for a loon pair. I still haven't figured out who the photographer was for this photo, but it was an amazing photo that somebody took. So that's just not plucked from the internet. That's actually on Lake Iroquois. We've been working with the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, the Loon Restoration Project, for many years, and we continue to see success with the loons. They come in, and it's something that just brings everybody together. So the residents and other folks who visit the lake will report loon sightings. We have a former member who maintains a spreadsheet, and we send that in to the Vermont Center for Eco Studies just to report on how things are. And we've also set up a nesting platform as well that's been very successful. They've used that each of the last 4 years, 4 seasons. So it's always good to report.
A question, does the effort you're doing regarding the loons interfere with recreational uses of the lake?
No, the loons will actually, I've been out on a paddleboard myself, the loons will just, I mean, they can dive deeply, as some of you may know, or all of you may know. They'll pop up 10 or 15 feet away from you, and as long as you're not trying to aggress them, they go on about their business. They're pretty, I say resilient. It doesn't seem to bother them. I'll put it that way.
So the human-powered craft I can see. How about the motorized craft?
They don't seem to be bothered by it.
Okay.
No, yeah.
I don't know if it's a comfort zone that they've gotten reached, but yeah, it's pretty amazing to watch.
One of the good things too, we placed the nesting platform as far as their nesting efforts. It's over in a protected cove. It's on, I would call it the Heinsberg-Richmond line, if you will. There's a nice cove over there, so the wave action is essentially, between the island and the cove, they're well protected from any boat action, or any wave action from any boats.
And they're life pairs, and they return to the lake each year. So it's pretty interesting to have them. Next slide, please.
We held our second annual Ice Out contest January through March of this year. A Williston resident won this year. Last year it was a Heinsberg resident for the first one. So lives very close to here, actually. So I think if folks are familiar with Joe's Pond, We have a block mounted on a pallet, and, when the ice is ready to go, it breaks, and that's when it stops the clock. So we plan to do that for a third season. We plan to continue that as long as we can. We invested in a nice web-based platform to make it as easy as possible for us to manage. So we look forward to that. I guess I would say shameless plug. We're gonna try to attempt to start that after Thanksgiving in an effort to maybe compel some folks to get some stocking stuffers. So hard to get people to think about ice in November, but it is coming. So
Roughly how much do you make on that?
the first year we made about $2,600. We had about 2,600 tickets sold. Last year, for whatever reason, I haven't checked in with other associations, but it was about half that. So, as somebody commented, something is new and exciting the first year, and then it ebbs. I could speculate maybe people were in a funk over another year of COVID. It's just so many variables there. So. Yeah, it's hard to say. So we're hoping for greater success this year. Next slide, please. And this is just our websites as far as our URLs. So nothing necessarily new to report there, other than we've distributed Lakeshore property owners manuals. That's part of our outreach and education process. And then we have a fall and a spring newsletter that folks who are signed up typically receive that as well. Next slide. And that's all I have for this evening. That's what Lake Iroquois looked like in 1962 for anybody who may or may not have been around. Dramatically different in terms of the vegetation, so very interesting.
Good, thank you very much for your presentation, and I see you have your a letter of request for the appropriation for the coming year, and that's helpful to have because we'll be starting to look at the budget in another month or so.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's time, and thank you for the questions as well.
And thanks again for all the support that Williston shares with us. That's essential.
It's an important resource. So
We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
The one question I had about your memo, letter, sorry. I see the total amount requested. Are you willing to say what your budget is for fiscal year '24? I just want to see what your budget is compared to what you're asking the town for.
Just in terms of, so we have three different things there.
Right.
So
I'm good with all things and understanding, how you came out with the amount. I'm just trying to compare the 15,000 that you're requesting and compare that to what is your total budget. So just so I have a sense of, it's one thing if your budget was 20,000, that'd give me, kind of one clue. If your budget's 150,000, that's, not, it doesn't make it doesn't impact anything. It's just helpful for me to know.
Right, understood. So to lay it out here, for DASH, for about 2 weeks of diver-assisted suction harvesting, that's about a $14,000 total amount. For the greeter program, we're looking at about 17 or 18,000 total for that. So what you see there among the three towns, well, I have something different than you do, excuse me. So for example, we're asking for 6,000 from the town of Williston. So we're looking to make up about $4,000 to $5,000 of that with a grant. So that's a total, for a total of about 18,000 as far as the budget there. For a plant survey, for doing two, it's 4,700. We're factoring inflation, about $5,000. So you're talking about some math there. What is that? 32 and 5. Roughly $40,000 if we round up just a little bit in terms of our efforts that really put a continuous draw throughout the summer months, the seasonal times that we manage milfoil or participate in other activities.
Okay, good, thank you. And that obviously doesn't include the Bibby Road work that
Oh, exactly, right. And I say we're at the mercy of the Lake Iroquois Recreation District. We work well with them, but whatever they say goes. But they're very happy for us to help them out with the grant efforts and trying to seek money for that.
Good, thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Again.
So that brings us up to the appointments of the Steering committee, there are 4 that we need to appoint tonight. And so when we get to that point, I've made a handy little chart. And we'll be asking you each for your 4 top choices. And if you'd like to have a general discussion about, not about necessarily about the candidates at this point, but as to what we're looking for, I'd be happy to entertain that.
Start with me.
Whatever, sure.
Okay, well, of course, there's the whole introduction of choosing 4 out of 10 is extremely tough. It's one of my least favorite
Yes.
chores on the select board, but I don't have a choice, so here I go. And I tried, my rationale for choosing these 4 really focused on what I saw were some strengths that they would bring to the I forget if we call it a board or a commission.
Community center scoping and library assessment.
Okay.
Steering committee.
And that they, that they each bring a separate or individual strength to the, as opposed to, we're duplicating some strengths. So to the best of my ability, the 4 I'm choosing are Lynn McClintock, John Butterfield, Mary Claire, I don't have her last name here.
McGovern.
And Andy Michael.
Thank you. Who's next?
I had the exact same people.
Same ones?
Yeah, I went with John Butterfield, Lynn McClintock, Andy Michael, and Mary Claire McGovern.
He was looking at my notes.
Yeah.
Gordon?
I'm 3 for 4. I had Andy Michael. My rationale was just trying to capture not only background, but just different perspectives that folks might bring to the scoping sequence. I also had Lynn McClintock. I had John Butterfield, and then I had Anne Hazelrig, just because she resonated with the kind of the library and the long-term connection she had there.
So I was so impressed with everybody, and so my thought process was really to represent different populations of our community within this, and everybody would bring so much time and talent to the committee, but so I also chose John Butterfield and Lynn McClintock and Mary Claire McGovern, but I thought that Erin Henderson represented a population that nobody else did, which was, parent of older teens and young adults, and which present a whole nother scope of needs that kind of nobody else was representing. So,
Good, thank you. I had John Butterfield, Mary Claire McGovern, Andy Michael, and Erin Henderson. So that leaves us with John Butterfield, who has all 5, Lynn McClintock, who has 4, Mary Claire McGovern with 4, and Andy Michael with 4. So it appears that we have our 4 selections, and we would need a motion to appoint those folks.
So moved.
So we have a motion made to appoint the 4. Is there a second?
a second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Thank you, everyone, for.
Yeah, thanks.
Indeed. If there's no further discussion, then all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
And there are no opposed. So now we're looking to, if we can tonight, to appoint a member of the select board to serve on the committee as well. And if we can't do that tonight, if people need more time to think about it, we can do that at the next meeting.
Rock, scissors, hammer?
Pardon me?
Rock, scissors, paper?
Rock.
I'm willing to do it, certainly, unless anybody else wants to volunteer. I'm certainly happy to cede to you. But I do think that, much like Erin, you know, I do represent a population of our town too, with certain age children, so I'm happy to do it, but again, also happy to let any of you do it.
No, thank you.
I mean, really, if you want to, it's fine.
I am not going to volunteer, and not necessarily because I don't want to, but I know my personal and work and other commitments, I cannot dedicate the time that is needed. I would be more of an anchor than a help. I don't like saying that, but I need to be honest.
Hearing no other volunteers, so we would need a.
Last chance, guys.
We would need a motion to appoint Greta to the, as a representative from the select board.
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any, no opposed? So we've completed that energy report is where we're at.
Well, you know, I just echo, it's great to have so many people put their name forward for this project. So it's, you know, just sitting here as an observer, it's great to hear everyone's engagement and questions. And these will all be open public meetings like any committee in town. So we hope to see some faces back again, especially with the community engagement. So it's exciting start here. We've, so our consultants on board, Black River Design, we're actually going to have a meeting Thursday. They're going to start going through the library a bit and start taking their baseline and looking at that facility, and also just gathering some information, talking with staff. So I think with the committee next steps here, the trustees have appointed their representative, the Recreation and Parks Committee. I think they're meeting this week, and that'll be on their agenda as well to round out the committee. So I'll send out a poll to everybody and hope to get the committee together. I hope once or twice before the end of the year. We've got the holiday season coming up. I think the work will likely pick up more in the new year. And thinking about the community engagement piece, this time of year isn't the ideal time to be doing community engagement, so it'll be building towards that probably in the late winter, early spring, I think. But I think we've got a really good consultant team on board here. So I was telling the Observer today, they're interviewing me about this. It's I share this with the board that I think it's important to do this well and not do this fast. So will be many updates to come and as we move forward here. So just getting started there. There's a whole lot to share in my written report this evening. A reminder, your retreat scheduled for November 29th at 6:30 here in the town hall for working on some DEI discussion with Abundant Sun consulting firm. Please report the Town Energy Committee has been awarded a grant from the Vermont Council on Rural Development to assist in an outreach campaign to residents to share information about home weatherization programs available. So thanks to our town energy planner, Melinda Scott, she authored that grant application. So that was good news there. There's a Veterans Day observance that's being planned by the Rotary Club on Veterans Day out between the buildings here. Like last year, I double checked the exact time, but I think it's going to be at 7:30 in the morning.
That's the last I heard too.
And the board may remember the Rotary Club is going to be donating a granite bench in the memory of Deb Beckett for her service to the town. We'll be getting that installed here before Veterans Day to have a dedication during that ceremony. We've found a spot adjacent to the memorial between the buildings, and that should be installed over the next week or so. And I probably look thinking about the facility outside here. There might be a way to grow that over time as well. So it'll be a good certainly a good welcome addition and tribute to Deb's service to be installed there. And your next meeting on November 15th, I anticipate some executive session topics. I just want to probably multiple. The board is available to meet at 6:30 that evening for an early start to that.
You suggest perhaps 6 o'clock to start, or?
I think 6:30 would be okay. It'd probably be a half hour to maybe 45 minutes of your agenda for these topics.
15th?
The 15th?
Yep, on the 15th.
On the 15th?
2 weeks from today.
At 6:30 on the 15th, yeah.
Yep.
I may have I may actually not be able to attend the meeting. My youngest daughter's turning 18 on that day, and it's an open question whether she wants me to have anything to do. In fact, I suspect that I'll be here early and stay late.
If you don't end up attending, Ted, I can chat with you beforehand about executive stuff. Okay for everybody else?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So the 15th at 6:30.
6:30. And I will leave it there for manager's report this evening.
All right. Is there any other business to discuss tonight? Going once? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all. It's